Welcome to the Tactical Business Podcast. I'm your host, Wade Skalsky, and today I'm speaking with Blaine Painter from Unknown Munitions. Blaine, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Good, glad to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to talk to you. You're doing a lot of cool stuff that is in my my current area of interest for firearms. So we move around from what we want to start focusing on, but I'm super excited to talk to you today. We were talking a little bit before we started the recording, and you were up in the panhandle of Idaho with some very pleasant weather today. So I'm sure that's awesome.
Yeah, it's we've not gotten the snow this year we normally get, and it's been very wet. The La Nina weather pattern is set up, and so it's been rainy and minimal snow. Not too cold either. So yeah, it's been pretty pleasant this year.
There's a lot of excitement in the country right now. Either your house is on fire or you're getting dumped with snow. So it's nice to hear that not
Yeah,
having those issues.
Yeah.
So all right, well let's dive into a little bit here. Let's chat. So kind of walk me through how you got into the firearm space. Like, how did you end up with a two-way business?
So I started out. My career is interesting. I've been shooting since I was 6. So that's like 58 years ago. And I went in the Air Force, was a pilot for 24 years, retired from the Air Force, worked for a forest products company for the next 12 and a half, and then the whole pandemic and all that stuff. And I was looking to move from Southern Oregon, where I'd lived, and kind of may have had a flying opportunity. It looked like it might be in the Spokane area. And I was thinking about that, but it was part-time. So I was looking for a day job. And I stumbled across this ad about this company called Unknown Munitions. And I go, what is that? So this is back in 2020. So I did some research and I stumbled across a podcast that Jake, the owner and founder of the company, was on with, pretty sure it was Ryan Avery of Rockslide. I listened to the podcast and they were talking about the loading and the stuff, and I was going, well, wow, I use a lot of that equipment. At that time I had gotten back into 1,000-yard bench rest shooting, which is my big shooting competition. Right now I shoot with the guys out at Missoula, typically, to Deep Creek, a little west of Missoula, and at IBS. Anyway, so I was listening to that and I go, well, I don't want to be a guy just to pull a handle on a reloading press, but maybe there's something I can do. So I reached out to him and said, hey, give him a call. And all he told me was, he said, I can keep you as busy as you want to be doing load developments. So that started the process, and we sold our house in Southern Oregon and moved to Northern Idaho. And I started out doing load development, kind of semi-retired part-time type thing. And so I would, about 3-4 days a week, I'd swing into it started in one bay of this 3-bay garage. I think the company started in 2019, late 2019, early 2020. And so I got there in February of 21. And so I'd swing, and by that time he was in 3 bays of his 3-car garage loading custom ammo. I'd swing by and, pick up rifles, go out to the range, shoot them, for accuracy, just doing standard load development stuff, and then come back. I did that for about a year, and he was wanting to expand the company and start building rifles. Well, when I got back into competition shooting in 2018, I bought a lathe and a milling machine because I got tired of waiting 9 to 12 months, to get barrels chambered for competition, where sometimes you need it done pretty quickly. And so I kind of self-taught, and I had very good success doing that. My rifles were placing very well in matches and shooting as well as anybody. So the machine work was not hard to figure out how to do. And so I was doing that. And so that next year, and starting about mid-2022, for the next 8 months or so, I chambered about 80 barrels for the company. And we built about 80 rifles then. And then the company expanded again. So by that time, we'd moved from the 3-car garage into like 3,600 square feet and set up, we bought a lathe and a milling machine and, and Cerakote and all that process. The next year we expanded, we doubled our space, added some more capability, added another lathe. And at that point, I moved out from being a primary lathe operator to being more the general manager of the company, and overseeing all this stuff. And we continued to grow and put out good quality products. We were tied in with Bat Machine, who makes some of the finest actions out there. They're 5 minutes from our shop, and so we got some help and guidance from them. In fact, they make actions for us and stuff. Anyway, we got going on that, and uh, expanded again, and then um, now I'm off the lathe completely. I'm the director of operations here, responsible for oversight of the company operations, basically, and whatever tasks and project need to be done. We have Taylor Thom on the lathe, who is the nephew of Bruce Thom of Bat Machine. And so he does a great job, and he's a general manager now, as well as doing work on the lathe. And it's been an interesting ride from semi-retired to full throttle into this. As a consequence of working here in the industry, I was able to go to Africa last August and fulfill a bucket list item. I got to Cape Buffalo, which was a huge deal. So this is the coolest place to work. People love to be here, and the company's still expanding and poised to grow even more.
So what an awesome story. So there's a lot to unpack there. One kind of through line for a lot of people in firearms industries that I've noticed is their ability to be a quick starter, right? So you're like, all right, so I'm going to take this job. I'm going to upend my whole, I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to move to Northern Idaho. And I don't really know what's going to happen from this, but I'm going to take that adventure, right? And so you've been rewarded for taking that adventure. So I think the first thing to think about is, if from the firearms perspective, is that you got to be willing to take that leap of faith into a business, right? And you were rewarded for that. The other thing I wanted to kind of talk about is walk me through a little bit, because I'm not a precision shooter. I'm interested in it. It's sort of like, that's sort of like my next phase of shooting. And so like walk me as someone who's like a lay person in that field, like what load development is, what that entails. I mean, from context, I know it's basically finding the right. I would assume it's like finding the right load for whatever ammo, for whatever type of competition, and for your gun. But walk me through how that works, and how your kind of your thoughts on that.
So the basic idea behind load development is optimizing a particular ammo for a particular rifle for firearm, and it's usually barrel specific, certain barrels. In the past, and there's a lot of people that kind of think this way. They go out and they buy a gun and they buy some factory ammo and they go out and shoot, and they'll probably be fine for hunting or whatever they're doing. The precision is not that demanding when you're shooting 100 or 200, even 300 or 400 yards. The precision really isn't that demanding. And so a lot of people are able to do that, and it works just fine. Then there are people that want to be more precise, and it's a combination of wanting the best that they can have, and also requirements. When you start shooting past 600 yards, the environmental factors start to become a big deal, and everything becomes important. You need to have a rifle that very consistently places shots where you want them to go. And not every gun will shoot every ammo well. Even a full-blown high-end custom gun is going to have a preference for what it likes. And so what we do is it's a pretty simple process. We kind of know what most of these cartridges are going to want to shoot. And we start with that, and we start a little bit low with our powder charges. We measure where the bullet ogive contacts the rifling. That's easy to do, simple, inexpensive tools. We measure that. We start the bullet typically about 20 thousandths from that point. And then we'd work through varying powder charges, depending on the capacity of the case. You take like a 7 PRC or a 300 PRC or 6.5 PRC, which are very common cartridges now, very good cartridges, probably half a grain increments. We'll start low and we'll work up, and we're looking for accuracy, as well as we don't want to have too much pressure. We don't want too hot of a load for the gun. And there's ways to tell that with reading the brass. And so basically we work through and we find what is the best powder load. And if it looks promising, then we'll fine tune that with seating depth. And we will vary the seating depth kind of the same way. It's a very systematic process. There are several different ways to get there. What's important is being systematic and consistent and changing only one thing at a time, and then testing it to repeat. And then, the end state for the custom rifles we build, our guarantee is that they will shoot a pair of 3-shot groups at 650 yards that are half minute or better. So that's like 3 1/4 inches or better at 650. We get a lot of them that'll do better than that, uh, but that is adequate accuracy for 1,000+ yard shooting on animals. And most of the hunting guns we build are capable of meeting that. My bench rest guns, if that's as good as it shot, I'd pull the barrel and throw it away. A bench rest gun has got to be stupid accurate. I mean, at 1,000 yards, 10 shot groups really need to be under 5 inches. And just to be remotely competitive, and you're not going to win if probably unless the conditions are really bad. You need to be in the low 4 inch range. 5 shot groups need to be in the 2 inch range, or low threes to be competitive. That's a whole different level. It's a competition gun. Hunting guns cannot do that, regardless of what you hear on the internet. You hear about these people that, oh, my gun is quarter moa all day long. Well, yeah, I've seen occasionally any gun is a quarter moa gun, but anyway, that level of precision is obtained by systematic and disciplined approach to load development. And like I said, there are 2 or 3 ways to do it, but the key is to be systematic and change one thing at a time.
How do you monetize that as a business? So is that something that you do it on a like on a macro level where it's like, okay, we're going to develop, this bolt, this ammunition for this specific gun, and that's our ammunition? Or is it more like on a micro level where someone will be like, hey, here's my gun, let's find the best ammo for it, or both?
Well, I mean, we do offer custom loaded ammo. That's how Jake started the company, as a custom ammo loading company, which you talked about taking risk earlier. Anybody that knows anything about the firearms industry wouldn't start a company with custom loading ammo, but he did and made it work. And so, but just we have some custom loaded ammo. It's very precise, but that doesn't mean the particular rifle is going to like that ammo. And so we have a couple of options. We build a lot of guns, and the service we offer is load development, where we charge people for load development,
Hmm.
and we take out the gun and shoot. I hate to call it break in because it doesn't do what people think it does, but we get some rounds through the barrel before we start trying to find the load to try to make sure the barrel is stabilized and settled down. And we do that, and then it's just a matter of finding. We start out at 100 yards to find out what doesn't work, and then we go to 650 when we find what's promising to fine tune it. But yeah, there's a charge for that. It takes a lot of time and skill and effort, and sometimes people are maybe a little bit taken aback at the cost unless they have done load development on their load. It's not hard to get sideways with a gun and be 300 or 400 rounds in. Then you add up how much you spent in components and time, and then all of a sudden our load development fee seems pretty reasonable.
Well, and what's nice about obviously about that too is you only got to do it once, right? So for that particular barrel, particular gun, you do the load development, and then like, okay, this is the round that we're going to use.
Well,
Um,
for a while, that's another misconception. The barrel changes every time you pull the trigger.
mm,
And so um, over time, the throat will erode and the accuracy may deteriorate. It's easy to get back, but that's why we don't like to sell much more than about 200 rounds at a time to somebody, depending on the cartridge. Some cartridges can shoot a lot, but like a 300 PRC, 100 or 200 rounds, it is very possible in the amount of that time, the load needs to be adjusted slightly
mm.
by a little bit longer seating depth, maybe a slight different powder charge. And so and this only is important. Back in the day when people were happy with an inch and a half gun, you didn't have to worry about any of this stuff because you would stay within that. But if you really want to stay around that half MOA uh, accuracy standard at long distance, then you're going to need to maintain it. And we help people with that too. We say, as you get near the end of your 100 or 200 rounds, if your accuracy is deteriorated a little bit, then we'll send them basically some ammo to test that the bullets are seated a little bit deeper or something like that to get them back lined up again for the next several hundred rounds. And so it depends, on the gun. In a typical hunting gun, you can have pretty good accuracy for a lot, several hundred rounds without changing anything. But if you want to maintain that very precise accuracy, it's required to be maintained, and we're set up to help people do that.
Well, but I would think that once you establish the baseline for that gun, though, because the barrel is only changing a little bit, then the load only has to change a little bit. So you don't have all that ramp up work because you already have the baseline. Is that
Right. It's
fair?
pretty
Yeah.
simple. It's
Yeah.
probably a matter of just seating the bullets a couple thousandths longer.
Well,
Um,
and that's awesome because I mean, and that's the thing that I always tell people when people that don't know anything about firearms is that the firearm as a vertical, there's so much depth to it, right? So you can go deep on shotguns, you can go deep on hunting, you can go deep on because you just the ammunition that we're talking about, we can talk about that for 2 hours, and the amount of the amount of time that it takes for you to learn how to do that as a business and monetize it. I mean, it really is. That's one thing about this that I love about talking firearms is you never run out of things to talk about, right? And that is an interesting service to start a business on, right? Because that is about as niche as you can possibly get, right? But you were there in the beginning in terms of when that was the core part of the business. Walk me through a little bit about the decision to build some guns, and then what was that like in adding that on, like in terms of if someone's thinking about because you guys have gone through a lot of expansion. What are some of the lessons that you've learned from that expansion, especially because you're on the manufacturing side?
it's a balance between risk and reward. And it takes that willingness to take a risk that you talked about earlier, but being smart about it and trying to approach it in a way that um, is fiscally sustainable. And so I don't recommend somebody go out and borrow a whole bunch of money and jump into it. You want to ease into it. You want to start in manageable chunks, and you want to start with some skill in the area. And that's kind of how we started with the ammo stuff and with the load development where the company started. Then when it was time to build rifles, that was interesting. We knew we needed more space, or else I was going to have to do everything at home. And so we had to find an appropriate size building, and we didn't go to a 10,000 foot building right off the bat. We started with a 3,600 square foot building in an industrial park, basically, and I was very careful on because I knew about lathes and milling machines. I knew what we should get. I had enough experience at that point. I think I'd had my lathe and mill for about 4 years, and I'd done enough that I understood what was required and the components to set up, and did a lot of research on it as based on my own experience, and reached out to a lot of people in the industry. There's a lot of very helpful people in the firearms industry. It's the demand is so great. We collaborate way more than we compete. And so we looked at those particular issues, and it's like made my recommendations, and we started in with that. And people got to understand too, you're never going to be 100% sure. We all have various personality types. My personality type is one that I like to be 98% before I engage on anything. If I just were to be left to my own devices, well, that's never going to work. You've got to make a move when you're 80% sure, or whatever it is, whatever that number is, you've got to make the move, and there's going to be uncertainty and there is a risk of failure. You have got to be willing to take that risk, or you're never going to accomplish anything. And that doesn't mean you don't have to be smart about it. And you're smart about it by doing the research, making sure you have appropriate funding in place that's sustainable, and just being smart about the whole process.
Yeah, no, and I think the bootstrap model seems to be the model that works for a lot of people, right? And by bootstrap I mean, okay, we're having success in this area, we have this dialed in a little bit. All right, let's take some risks now, right? Because we have a kind of a base that we can make some moves from and then get that feedback. And then so you decide to build the rifles, you know, are they precision rifles? Are they air platforms? Are they hunting rifles? Like, or all of the above? Like, what was the decision making process that went into, say, because you have a lot of options. Like, what was that like, and what did you guys land on?
We're primarily precision bolt action hunting rifles for shooting long range. And that's an interesting point that I should have brought up earlier, is that's Jake's passion. And because that's his passion, he immersed himself in that and learned it. And he has a very good understanding of what guys want, because they want what he wants. So his decisions on products and what to do are very spot on for what people need. You know, I'm a lot longer in the tooth than Jake, been doing this a whole lot longer. And so I'm very niche in what I want and like to do, you know, very niche, however you pronounce it. And I mean, the long range bench rest world is extremely small. We do all the R&D on bullets and stuff that people get to use, but you know, we're very small. It's very specialized, very difficult sport. But that was the key is so Jake had a passion for this, and his passion was long range hunting rifles. We've done a little bit with ARs. We typically recommend other businesses for ARs. We'll do Cerakoting on ARs and stuff like that. We've built a few competition rifles, and you know we have to be careful with that because uh, you know I've got experience with bench rest. I know from being in the industry and being around other competition shooters what guys in F class want to build, what guys in PRS want to build. And so uh, I try to point people in that correct direction. But so we do a little bit with competition rifles, but the primary market is long range hunting guns. And if you don't need to shoot at long range, you don't need a custom hunting rifle because you can buy one off the shelf and do just fine with it. Unless you've
Right.
got some really weird, you're a really weird shape, or you just want something really nice or very specific.
Yeah, when you from a marketing perspective, right, from the business, it sounds like that you're the guy, the owner is the market, right? So like he intimately knows, all right, this is I know how to talk to these people, I know what they want, I know what their pain points are, and I know where to meet them exactly where they are because I am the market. And I think that is a great place. And I think that is a great place for most firearms people to start because you'll see people who are an AK guy, right? Well, then they make AKs, you know what I'm saying? And they so many businesses start by people filling the void for something that they want. And I think that's a powerful lesson. And it seems like you guys are staying within that niche, right? So like Cerakote's still within the niche, your custom builds for the hunting is still within the niche, starting from that load development. And then how is your marketing in terms of, is that word of mouth? Is it, I know you guys have an online presence. Do you guys just rely on organic marketing, or do you have sort of campaigns that you run? What is your philosophy on getting the word out?
We have a couple of ways. Believe it or not, Instagram is a huge marketing tool. And I forget how many followers we have. We have a marketing department, a couple of guys in there that are real sharp. We do a lot of videos and posts on Instagram. You know, we have our email list. There's word of mouth. Um, the We go to shows like Jake is going down to SHOT Show later on this month. Uh, and by developing relationships within the industry, that also generates business, and people come in to check you out. It's funny. We get a lot of local guys that come in and say, "Hey, I didn't even know you guys were here," and it's probably because local marketing, I don't think, is done as much as it was. I mean, we started out, we put up flyers at the ranges and stuff like that, and then I would say this, probably more word of mouth for local. We've had a couple of events here too where we brought people in, but I think our online presence is probably bigger. And there's advertisement through Rockslide. Rockslide is a huge firearms related hunting and fishing forum. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Mhm.
It's I think Ryan tells me that it's the largest hunting related forum outside of a particular bow hunting forum. And I don't know how they do those metrics or do that, but I know there's a lot of information. And also, we have podcasts too. We do a weekly podcast. Jake and Ryan typically do it. That generates a lot of interest. We've got stuff on YouTube, stuff on Google. So I guess it's all above. It's typical 21st century digital marketing, word of mouth, the whole thing. I mean, you have to engage in every possible way to make sure people understand who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, I write for the 2A community and for firearms businesses, and the one thing where it's different from some of my other clients that are in other industries is that it requires a much higher level of trust, right? So just the consumers themselves, the other businesses and connections. So I think doing things in person, like going to SHOT Show or going to events or holding local events, is very smart because you can't it takes longer to break down that distrust that people normally have in the industry on the internet or whatever. Or whereas in person, when you can see someone, in the, your geographic area or whatever, or at a show, I think that makes a big difference. You talked about, and talking about geography, I like to talk about geography a little bit, because one thing I've noticed is that almost all of the businesses that are successful that I talk to, there's some element of the geography that helps them in some way, right? So for when you were talking about when you guys moved into your space, that you have another business that helped you. I can't remember what you said who they were. That there was another business close by that was like 5 minutes away or whatever. You guys collaborate with. What was their name?
A bat machine.
Bat, yeah. Now, was that on purpose that you're like, hey, when we pick this location, we know these guys are close, we're going to kind of like do that, or did that happen organically? And then kind of walk me through how this helped you guys.
That happened organically, and that's actually an interesting story. Bat Machine became aware of us, and now I was aware of a Bat Machine for a long time before I ever even knew. Before Unknown Munitions was ever an idea in Jake's head, I was using Bat Machine actions for my bench rest guns,
Hmm.
because they're some of the best of the best. And so I had familiarity with it, and I didn't realize at first when I moved out here, it was like, wow, I'm right down the road from Bat Machine. I don't have to call anymore and wait. I can just go down there. And so uh, we started that way. And as we built and we started doing the rifle builds, Jake reached out to them and said, hey, we would like a action for us to use, and here are the requirements of it. And they were glad. And so they built, we call it the Vesper. It's in long, medium, and short. And they build that action for us, and that goes on our premium rifle builds. And so that's where the relationship started. And after a while of watching this grow, our general manager, like I said, is the nephew of Bruce, and also his dad works. His dad is Daryl. His dad works at Bat Machine too. And so the collaboration say, hey, we've got, you know, uh, this kid, he's 30s, that would like to come work for you. And so we brought him in, and he's been a huge success story. But so it's any of these collaborations, they probably start out with a personal relationship, probably is how it starts, and then it develops, and the trust, and which is kind of, I'm more the other way. I'm more of a data and numbers kind of guy, but that's never going to grow your business. You've got to reach out and connect with people. And all of those good connections we've made have resulted in revenue. We sell a lot of those Bat Machine actions. We sell them to people directly as well as on rifle builds. That's something else I think is important, is that you have to balance what you're going to keep proprietary with what you're going to release to everybody. And if you want to do everything and say, if you want this, you can only get stuff from us, maybe that works when you're really big, but when you're first starting, you have to, take the business however it comes. If somebody just wants to buy an action and build it themselves, yeah, we'll let you do that. If they want you to build the whole gun. And so that's why we have various options, from us providing all the parts to a rifle build to somebody buying all the stuff and building it themselves. We support all of that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, there has to be give and take, and so it's the melding of all those things together. You talked earlier about risk and reward, right? And having to do that balance. Well, the same balance has to be for the human connection and then the numbers, right? Because the numbers are important. Like, you'll have a lot of people, they're still running their businesses off of a legal pad, and they're in somehow in manufacturing. I'm like, how do you do that, right? And so you need to be able to kind of have a little bit of both. One thing that you did say that I heard I wanted to follow up with is that you said that there's a lot of demand, like there's so much demand that you're not really competing with people as much as you're collaborating with them. When you refer to that demand, what demand are you referring to?
Just consumer demand for firearms products.
Right.
And it's interesting. I mean, there are busier times and slow times for sure, but it just seemed, well, give you an idea. It takes us about, from the time we have all the components here, 4 to 6 months to build a rifle. And components can take a while to get here. So I have tried since I've been here to speed that up. And no, it doesn't take that long to build a rifle, but that's just the backlog of orders. And for the longest time, every decent firearms manufacturer or rifle builder or whatever has had long lead times, 6 to 12 months. Macmillan stocks, perhaps you've heard of them. They make very quality fiberglass and carbon fiber stocks. They've been around forever. 30 years ago, they had a 6-month order file.
Hmm.
And, you know, and at the time I lived in Arizona. It was my last assignment in the Air Force. And the general manager for Macmillan would shoot with us there in Tucson. And, you know, I pressed him and said, why don't you guys buy another machine, add another shift or whatever? And that's something else interesting about the industry is people reach a certain level of business and seem happy with that. And it's because it's sustainable that, you know, through the ups and downs, they're going to be able to maintain their level of business, not have to lay people off. And so that's why I say that there's a whole lot more collaboration and competition, just because the demand is so great that, you know, it's not like grocery stores or automobiles. It just takes so long to get stuff because, you know, the supply just hasn't caught up, and I don't know if it ever will.
Well, and I think one of the reasons is because you're in the and that's for manufacturing businesses, because there are not enough manufacturing businesses for firearms and or just the United States in general, and there are not enough gunsmiths, right? So if you those two things together, anything that requires a gunsmith or anything that requires manufacturing, you're going to be able to have that from a business perspective, like that wait list or that back order that is going to give you that stability, because you'll know, and it'll be a leading indicator. So you'll say, all right, okay, our wait list has gone from 6 months to 3 months. What's happening? Right. And then you'll be able to maybe make adjustments, and that is a very powerful place to be in business. This is off the topic, but what years were you in Tucson?
I was in there 04 to 07.
Okay. I went to high school in Tucson, so that's why.
Oh,
So
did you? Oh, yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was stationed at Davis-Monthan.
Yep. Yeah, I
Yeah,
went to high school. I went to high school and college in Tucson, so I very obviously
yeah,
my dad lives there, so very familiar with that.
yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about the manufacturing. So obviously, as you grow, you're going to have this capital intensive requirement the more you grow because of the manufacturing, right? So you said, okay, we're going to have to get another lathe or whatever. And it's not like you're buying, a building or whatever, but how does that go into the equation about, you say, hey, maybe we want to like go into other areas like Cerakote, or maybe want to go to other areas that aren't going to require as much on the manufacturing side, or is that something like, no, we're going to keep growing on the manufacturing side as big as we can?
We're trying to grow everything. You know, the shoot to hunt is the an associated business. It's all under, you know, the unknown parent company, but they're technically a different company. And I'm sure you're familiar with that. You know, you set up different companies in different ways. I mean, and they're right here in our building with us. And in fact, it's where I'm sitting now. But they do marketing and they do web design, and they also do web design for other companies. So the idea is a broad approach to try to reach several different market segments. So I mean, we sell components, retail, and reloading supplies. We build rifles. We do Cerakoting, and sometimes we Cerakote stuff other than rifles. They've brought in vehicle rims to get Cerakoted before, headers. Um, and then there's we also have what we call the Shoot to Hunt University, which is there's shooting schools that we put on and classes, and we're trying to increase uh, our online presence as well. I want to put a reloading class online. And so the idea is we're trying to grow in all areas. That way, we're not tied to one particular area. One thing that I can tell you, and this kind of gets to future, we've ordered a titanium 3D printer that's coming this month, and we're going to start making suppressors this year. So we're adding a whole new area to that, and our focus is going to be on suppressors for hunting rifles.
Right.
Suppressors are getting easier to get as people realize they're not these big evil silencers that criminals use. It's more PPE, personal protective equipment, and
Yeah.
so, but all those suppressors now tend to be built for range guns type thing. And you don't need a big, long 9-inch suppressor when you're out hunting. You want a shorter, lighter one just so it doesn't damage your hearing when you shoot.
Well, yeah, and I don't think suppressors should be regulated, because it's like you said, it's a PPP thing. It's like having ear protection for for headphones or
Yeah.
whatever. And hunting hunting loadouts are really loud. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're out deer hunting and you're shooting something that's loud, and you need more than when you're shooting a 9, that's for sure. Well, that's exciting, and I know that you got this. I know there has to be an element of you that is like, I don't know what the percentage is, right? But like 10% of you of your gearhead personality is like, I can't wait to get my hands on this titanium 3D printer, right? Like that's just cool. Like that's just like let's do this, one, because it's a good business idea, but two, it's just kind of cool to have one of those.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I geek out on machines. I'm really, I have a lathe and milling machine at home. And so and I'm not a trained machinist, and I fully admit that, but it's not hard to figure out how to make a barrel, how to chamber a barrel to make it accurately. But yes, it's cool. It's like being a kid. So I come to work every day. I mean, so in the Air Force, I got to fly jets. That was cool. A lot of work associated with that. They managed to take the fun out of it with all the additional stuff you have to do. Then when I worked for the forest products industry, that was just a typical mid-level corporate job, not exciting, whatever. Here, I come to work and talk about guns all day, which is one of my major hobbies. And so, in fact, everybody here is enthusiastic about firearms. And that just keeps you coming back. And the machines are cool, and having access to them. And yeah, that's a unintended fringe benefit, I guess, of being here.
Well, you get to, everyone says monetize, or if you're able to work on your passion, it's not really work.
Yeah.
That can be true, but can also be a trap, right? Like you have to find that special, like you said, like jets, flying jet. I'm in Virginia Beach, and you can't spit and not hit a jet pilot or a special
Hmm.
forces person, right? So like I know guys, obviously, like you said, like yeah, flying jet seems like it's amazing, but you can make that not fun. You know what I mean? Whereas, and so that's, anything can be like that. So the fact that you've kind of are in a situation where everyone likes what you're doing, you're having fun, you're getting to play around with gearheads type stuff. That's really great, and I think it that does take some work and some skill to create that situation and create that environment, which is a good place to go next. So how do you guys, in terms of from a work environment, what are you finding success with for your team? How is it that managed? How is that culture, created, sustained, grown? What's working for you guys on that front?
We're very picky about who we hire, and fit is everything. And we kind of discovered this. We leaned this. We leaned the direction before we ever started because of my personality and Jake's. Is that we want to hire sharp, motivated people, even if they're not as skilled in an area. That stuff can be learned. I've spent my whole life learning how to do stuff that I did never think I'd be able to do. I mean, I'm a complete nerd band geek guy that got to fly supersonic jets in the Air Force, so we can
Hmm.
learn to do way more than we think we can. And so that was our approach. We want sharp people that are a good fit. It's a bonus if they have a skill set that really fits strongly. But so we look at that when we hire people. They have to be liked and get along with everybody. And not everybody's a good fit. And that doesn't mean they're a bad person or whatever. But the environment here is to be positive and uplifting. And with my time as an Air Force officer, I had basically, I was in 24 years, and when you count ROTC, 27 years of leadership training. And as you know, you've been around guys like me. The leadership training we get is top notch, and it's not who's wrong, it's what's wrong. And that's one of the things here. People don't get in trouble for making mistakes. We try to address where the system broke down. And I remember telling these guys, I'm the oldest guy here. Most of the other guys that work here are in their 20s or 30s, and I think maybe one or two in their 40s. But I'll tell them, look, so if so and so is doing this job and they're not doing a good job, whose fault is that? And the idea of teaching leadership is you're responsible for that. So you have to train them, you have to help them, that they're going to come in and they're going to have a pretty good general skill set, but specifically what we do, and this applies to any industry, the specifics of how you do it's a little bit different. And so we try to take that focus, the whole idea, praise in public, criticize in private, that's an old military idea, but it really, people have the wrong idea about the military. I mean, the times where you get stood up and chewed or chewed out publicly are extremely rare. But And we just don't do that here. So we try to empower people, encourage people, people to take initiative. And it's okay to make mistakes. I think that's people have got to be free and empowered so they know if they make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Because if people are afraid to take risks and try stuff, we're not going to grow as a company. And we've all made mistakes and we're going to make more mistakes. And we stand behind what we do when we make a mistake. If the customer's involved, we make it right. We'll send out a shipping label to have a rifle sent back, and we'll check it over and do whatever it is to make it right. And so that reputation is important. And Jake often says that the person standing in front of you as a customer is the most important person. And so he's from day one tried to emphasize that. And so that's the kind of culture I'm trying to bring. I'm trying to bring the best parts of every place that I've worked, of working where interaction have gone well. And I've also been part of bad teams as well. That's one advantage age provides, is that you've seen the good and the bad. And so trying to emphasize the good. And that seems to be working. People are generally happy to be here and do a good job and look forward to coming in and working.
Yeah, I'm 52, so I've had
You've been there too.
Yeah, I've had my experiences, and we've all been part of bad teams, and nothing will torpedo an organization faster than a bad hire, right? Because
Organizational health is as critical as your specific expertise in a particular field.
And I think one lesson that I think is really important that you're emphasizing is if you have two candidates and one of them has all the skills that you need, like super hyper skilled, like would be like everything you would a dream candidate for the skills, but it has not a great attitude, and you have someone who is coachable and has a great attitude and is capable of learning those skills, you take the dude who you train, right?
Absolutely.
Because the first guy will ruin your has the potential to ruin your organization, and the culture is important. I mean, that's I don't think people understand that.
I agree.
So where do you guys, what's the plan for the next like 2 to 5 years? I know you said you want to expand the manufacturing base. You're doing the silencers or the suppressors. What maybe I think the suppressors is probably your guys' next step. Why did you want to get into that? Like, what was is it the side the regulation was going down a little bit, or you just that was a natural progression?
The demand is insane for suppressors. Yeah. And so that's why it was the next logical place to go. There's a lot of revenue potential in suppressors. And not to sound just like a greedy businessman, also it's kind of cool. We get to play with them and use them, but ultimately it's got to sustain itself and support itself. And so I think that's the main reason, is there's a big need for suppressors out there. And so we're going to get in suppressor market, and we're trying to find a little bit different market than everybody else. Like I said, we want to have these suppressors that are specific for hunting. In terms of other growth, I mean, we just hired a guy whose job is going to be to answer the phone, answer emails, because it's gotten so overwhelming with the calls that we get that we're not getting them as timely as we need to be. And so, that's good. And, you were talking about demand earlier too. And these are rough numbers. The first 9 months of the year, along with being general manager, I was also the primary rifle salesman and oversaw load development and any troubleshooting or knowledge issues in the shop. And, I sold, a certain amount of rifles. The last 2 months of the year, and I trained a guy that's dedicated as a rifle salesman. In the last 2 months of the year, we've sold more rifles than we did the first 9 of 2024. Now, part of that, people are feeling a little better about the economy and everything, and there's a little bit more stability. Also, I think part of it is we got somebody who's dedicated to doing that. So for the future, we're looking at growing each segment of the business. We're willing to add people when we need it and add space. We're going to have to add more space when we start doing the suppressors. We're looking at other projects, some I can't talk about, that we're looking at doing in the future. We collaborate with a lot of other companies. Like there's a brass making company called ADG, and they make, I think, some of the best brass out there. I use it in my bench rest guns. And we've got some collaborations going on with them. And they're also not a huge company. That's probably something you notice too. Firearms companies generally aren't great big companies. They're small companies. And people get frustrated. Well, I called and I can't get a hold of anybody. Well, it's because everybody wears multiple hats and is so busy. So as we grow, we're trying to address that, and people get more specialized in their particular field. I only do really weird, funky rifle builds now, and like I said, my main task is overseeing operations and trying to optimize that, because that's where we are now. I mean, I'm looking at some software optimization, some process optimization, all that kind of stuff, which I've done all through my time in the Air Force and with the Forest Products Company. And so I think that's the path that, continuing to expand all our opportunities. We're going to have to add more long range shooting schools because those are filled up, all except for the one we're doing one in Africa that's kind of neat this year. It's a shooting school for 4 days and 4 days of a plains game hunt. And in just every place we can find growth, we're going to grow, because you have to. You never know what segment is going to be up and down. Sometimes retail is up, sometimes rifle builds are up, sometimes Cerakote is up, more than the others. So we try to just be able to do all of that and grow every part of it. And, pretty soon we're probably going to have to add more machine tools, like another lathe or something.
There's a guy called Dan Kennedy who is big in the marketing space, and he says 1 is the most dangerous number in business, right? So the fact that you're diversifying, the fact that you're not afraid to experiment with things, I think is one of the reasons why you guys are experiencing so much success. Well, we're kind of coming up against it on time. I'd love to have you on the show again in the future, because it seems like you guys are one of those businesses that you're going to have 3 new things to tell me about. We can talk about how do people find you guys. Obviously the website is unknownmunitions.com. If they want to get a hold of you, or if they want to talk to someone there, the phone number is 208-262-6103. Is there an email that so they can send their questions to if they have questions for you?
Probably the place to start is sales@unknownmunitions.com.
Okay.
If you're typing that with your phone, be careful. Unknown Munitions is one word, and it's easy to put a typo in there. But the sales line is where it's probably the first place, and then it branch out from there to get, more specialized.
Amazing. Well, again, I've had a great time talking to you, and I think that people are going to get a lot of value from this, especially people who are on the manufacturing side, Blaine. So great to talk to you.